Okay, so we'll continue on with the same. We'll continue with the same topic on the context and the main features, the context of the rise of the political outsiders in Latin America, and the main features of the participatory or model, they introduced based on mass participation in political decision making, and whether or not they offered an alternative path to representative or to the liberal democratic paradigm. We actually investigated in some detail the case of Rafael Correa in Ecuador last lecture, and we touched upon the context within which Hugo Chavez assumed power in Venezuela, and we will continue on this lecture with Chavez and the assessment of his populist democratic model. Like briefly, the movement emerged initially within the army, and his regime based on civil-military alliance. So the movement started to reach out to civilian militants in order to recruit supporters in society and to appeal to wide masses and to build wide base of support in society. And the public, like Venezuelans, started to get to know Chavez after his brief appearance on the TV after the failed coup in 1992. And actually, with this wide disillusionment with the established or the traditional political parties there, that slowly eroded until eventually collapsed entirely in 1998. He actually managed to assume power in the elections and to attract wide segments in society. He actually transformed the Bolivarian revolutionary movement that emerged initially inside the military, from actually with the support of some officers from modest background, economic background, but the education and the professional career offered them avenue to for social mobility, and then to form this this movement with this inclination towards patriotic sentiments and the elevation or taking pride in the military career, and to purge the country of corrupt elites and to dismantle corrupt institutions as well. So with this kind of nationalist mission and invoking the heritage of Simón Bolívar and restoring, this liberation mission of the army in Latin America. So they started their mission, and then they appealed to civilian militants, and they started to recruit some social supporters and to actually to build wide support base. So this, they created a parallel electoral structure by transforming, the MBR 200 into MVR, in order to run for the elections and to have their electoral campaigns and to articulate their political discourse and instill actually their revolutionary ideas. So they created, the movement with this hierarchical and vertical structures, and they tried to transform it into mass organization or mass party with collective, with complex organizational structure and collective leadership. But actually it all depended on the personality and the charismatic personality of Hugo Chavez in order to arbitrate or to resolve all the internal disputes. And it had negative repercussions and implications for the stability of the entire system after the death of Chavez. So one important turning point happened in 2002. 2001, 2002, and culminated into the failed coup attempt in 2002, with the rising social polarization and social opposition in the society. Because of this, his revolutionary ideas and nationalist based political decisions, he tried to transform the economic structure in the first 3 years from a neoliberal based economy to a socialist one, and he promised like 21st century of socialism. This actually triggered, as it happened historically in Latin America, this triggered like wide and social opposition from like people who believe in who believe in different, political ideologies, or they adopt different political discourse. So they don't believe in socialism and this revolutionary ideas or activism in doing politics. So with the rising opposition, not only from people who don't believe in his Bolivarian revolutionary ideas, but also from within his own camps or from his allies as well, and they started, to defect from the movement. As I mentioned, Podemos actually, but continued to support Chavez until shifted or made its move into the opposition camp in 2007. That actually was like another turning point during Chavez's rule. And then the fatherland part for everyone actually defected as well, and they broke with Chavez entirely in 2007. So what happened after this coup? This actually pushed Chavez in order to undertake or to implement even a more radical economic and social project. So he directed the failed coup attempt, and the rising social and political opposition actually pushed him towards more self-assertive direction. So he started to radicalize more the Bolivarian project, and as I mentioned, one of the essential or the core of his alliance is like the military establishment. So he started to count heavily on the military in public administration, like in local. At the local level and in local governments, and with regard to cabinet posts as well. So he created kind of a parallel administrative structure to the traditional one by depending heavily on the military as an institution for the cabinet and gubernatorial posts as well. And as I mentioned, his nationalist and revolutionary discourse relied on the discourse had like a specific economic program that actually aimed at indigenizing or developing homegrown economic and social policies in order to break with any kind of economic dependency on the West and basically the US. So the main target was to transform or to make its way to push Venezuela in order to make its way to a socialist path, and to elevate it to be like the regional power in Latin America. So he started, to implement some nationalist measure and to centralize the management of economic resources in order to move ahead or to proceed with this centralized or planned economy, and to expropriate and confiscate, private assets. He as well created like as a petrostate. This offered him abundance of economic resources, basically drawn basically from the oil rents. So he established special funds. That these funds actually fell outside of the traditional administrative structure or the traditional administrative the traditional public administration structure, and these special funds actually fell directly under his administration, the president's management, or the president's administration, totally under his jurisdiction. So he had, with creating these special funds and having control over its management, Chavez actually managed to have control over the oil resources, and to have control over PDV SA, the state-owned petroleum company. So he actually had full control over the oil rents and the oil resources that enabled him to implement his extensive distributive social and economic programs. And in order to effectively implement, this participatory democracy model, he realistically created, mass-based organizations. The most important ones, he started out with Bolivarian circles in 2001 in order to enable this wide mass participation in decision-making process, to substitute for, or actually to complement, in the beginning, to complement, the traditional institutions, but effectively it actually replaced the traditional participatory electoral channels, representative channels that actually occupy the central position in the liberal paradigm, or the liberal democracy. So he actually created or invented these Bolivarian circles that served as voluntary associations, and people had to show their commitment or their strong belief in Bolivarian revolutionary ideals in order to serve the community. And so they had to show to what extent they are loyal to Chavez and to the movements, the Bolivarian movements ideas, or the main revolutionary pillars of the movement. And it actually, the estimated number, according to the government statistics from Hawkins' article, it actually encapsulated more than 2.2 million members. So they voluntarily served, in these circles in order to serve the community and to abide by the revolutionary ideals of the movement, the Bolivarian movement. And he actually created other associations or community-based associations in order to provide some social services, and at the same time to offer job opportunities for poor people, or for the communities in marginalized or poor areas. Health committees as well, in order to offer healthcare services and to establish health clinics, especially in poor or rural areas. And actually, he created more than 6,000 committees there. Cooperatives as well. It had this joint, the structure, the structure of the cooperatives was based on joint ownership. So the cooperatives actually did seek some profits, but it enabled some sort of distribution of some basic goods to some marginalized areas, and to serve poor people as well. Urban land committees that enabled actually some shantytown dwellers and people in rural areas as well to have their legal petitions and to get legal recognition and title to their own lands. So these committees, included more than 2 million members as well, in order to offer these legal services to with regard to recognition of urban lands. Communal councils as well. In order to implement all these functions, he created, or he depended on communal councils as a parallel, again, administrative structure in order to implement this community development projects at the local levels. And it included, the councils actually included more than 8 million participants in order to help with implementing these social and community development projects. So it served actually two purposes. The first one, to provide some, or to distribute some social services to communities and to poor people, especially in poor areas and in rural areas, and at the same time with an eye towards elections as well. So the movement actually invested in these community development projects in order to serve as electoral bastion, or to have like a wide support base during the elections, to mobilize voters, or even to buy votes. As you are going to see, in order to benefit from these social or community development projects or programs, so they have thought, like the citizens had to issue like ID with their names on it, the card, so that he used this card to penalize the factors. So if people like didn't vote for him or for the movement in the elections, so they might be penalized by excluding them from these social services. So he actually used these programs to penalize as well, to raise the exit cost, and to penalize the factors or people who thought about changing their partisan or political allegiances or loyalties. One of the most extensive programs as well that actually he designed in order to save the people, he called like Misiones, or social missions program, that these programs were developed in 2003 in order to cover different areas like health, education, nutrition, training and employment, and housing as well. And these programs as well enabled or offered some space for communities or for people in order to participate in providing these services on the one hand, and it served these programs actually served as well as like electoral channels in order to mobilize voters, or to make sure about their compliance to Chavez and his Bolivarian movement. So for healthcare, like Barrio Adentro, and it included like it offered like some space for mass participation, and as well it offered them some sort of job opportunities in order to advance their livelihood. And Robinson too, and Rebus, these programs offered some educational services to poor people in primary education and secondary education. And Merkel actually offered some subsidized food stores across the country in order to help, or to offer like to serve this nutrition purpose across the country, especially again in people in the extreme poverty or in rural areas. So he actually these programs actually were funded from outside the framework again of the public administration, and he transferred the funds directly from the special funds, especially from the oil rents from PDV SA, to these in order to fund these programs. So these programs actually counted mainly on government funding, and he didn't have ample room for like to act freely or independently from the government. Misiones or social missions, actually, they were one of the most or the largest actually social funds or social fund programs in Latin America, across like Latin American countries. And according to government estimates or some statistics, it actually account for in 2004 they actually allocated like 4.5% of the GDP in order to fund these programs. So nearly $5 billion. So it's really like large social funds to be allocated to provide public goods and social services. And again, like if you see here, like the like people had to have like this kind of ID cards in order to make or to drive benefits from Misiones. And it served as, like as I mentioned, like two main purposes, or he had like two main objectives from these programs. On the one hand, to transfer funds directly to poor people or to the low income population, and in order to use these programs in order to manipulate elections and to manipulate the political context in order to buy votes or to mobilize voters in support of MVR. And again, like these voluntary or community development projects, people, the military as well, like played important role in managing and in the administrative structure of these councils, or the parallel structure of these social programs. And like at the local level, these kind of neighborhood organizations or neighborhood associations, people like in charge of running or managing these programs, and mayors and like the leaders of these organizations, they had to show their loyalty to to Chavez and his revolutionary Bolivarian ideas. So some of them, or they were actually considered as soldiers of the revolution. So meaning that they had to show like their to what extent they conform to the Bolivarian and revolutionary and activist ideas, and to serve, and to what extent they were loyal to Chavez as a person, and then to serve, these to abide by the programs and the ideological pillars of the movement MVR. This actually enabled Chavez to get re-elected in 2006 with obvious improvement in social and economic indicators. So here, from 2003 until 2006. So when it comes to social and economic indicators, the unemployment rate actually dropped from 18% to 10.5% in 2006. So in 3 years, actually, the household actually they left below the poverty level. It decreased from 55% to 32%. And then in extreme poverty, they dropped from 25% to nearly 10%. With the Human Development Indicator or index, it's a composite index, that measured literacy rate and the per capita income as well. So it witnessed like a slight improvement from 2003 until 2006. So he actually managed to show realistically how his social and economic programs improved the living conditions and the basic social and economic indicators for the people. So people felt, the consequences of his distributive programs and his development projects, community development projects. And he actually depended, as any populist leaders, he depended as well in like media and propaganda machine in order to maintain, his control over power. It served him as well to get re-elected by instilling, these revolutionary ideals and concentrating, power in the executive. And with establishing this hyper presidency, it offered him much more flexibility when it comes to managing or making like economic decisions and managing these extensive social programs. But he had, again, like he campaigned on the same populist platform with vague notions about obviously like justice and equality, but vague notions regarding liberty and solidarity, because still like his policies triggered social polarization, and it triggered it prevented, the like political opposition from vocalizing any, even from his allies. His policies actually increased the cost of defection from like people who benefited from his programs on the one hand, and on the other hand, they didn't have freedom, to express, their opposition, or to voice, different opinions. And on the other hand, like people who opposed, the Bolivarian revolutionary ideals, he alienated them, and they were unable, to articulate different programs. So when it's still like vague notions about like liberty and solidarity, because he called upon like people to support or to be loyal to show faith in his Bolivarian revolutionary ideals. But when he got re-elected, he showed like his determination to radicalize even more the Bolivarian project, and he introduced a proposal for constitutional reforms. So the most important elements in this proposal. First, he suggested creating like a special strategic region with a specific or a special authority in order to defend the country, or to have like sovereignty over these strategic regions, in order to serve the purpose of defense, and to protect these regions, especially during the emergency periods. He actually provoked the professional army as well by proposing incorporation of the Bolivarian militias into the regular or the national army, like transforming the national army into the Bolivarian army and incorporating these militias into the national or the professional army. So he actually, this actually like diminished or blurred the boundaries between like the civil military alliance, and he tried to subject or to subordinate the military personnel to the president's authority as well, and this provoked some elements inside the military. So he provoked actually his allies as well. And he promised more radical nationalization policies and more expropriation policies, with a clear like violation of property rights. And this actually triggered opposition from the other camp, like people who don't believe in Bolivarian and revolutionary ideas or conservative elements in the society. He's actually self assertion attitude or approach to implement these reforms led eventually to his defeat in the defeat of the constitutional reforms. Actually, voters rejected the constitutional reforms by a narrow margin, like no vote actually won by 50.6%. But this actually gave like a great boost to the political opposition that they didn't have any other way to oppose or to vocalize their opposition or dissent. So they played with the same rules of the game, with the same like electoral with the same electoral tools. So they used it to their advantage. So this like with regard to the constitutional voting on the constitutional reforms, they participated in the referendum and they mobilized voters for no vote. And this actually gave gave them a momentum in order to articulate different policy programs or different political alternative after this defeat of the constitutional reform. And this actually triggered like self-critical tendencies inside the Bolivarian circles as well. So they started to create like online space or to create some associational space in order to deliberate about what went wrong with the movement, and they started to express their concerns over like stigmatizing opposition, the intolerance towards like political opposition or other political ideologies. So they started to express their concerns about like they didn't dub it, but like authoritarian inclination of the movement by excluding, different opinions and never allowing, different opinions to nourish or to thrive or to express to allow opponents to express themselves freely, even from within. From within, the members of the movement or from the allies of Chavez. So they started to be critical of Chavez policies, and they started to vocalize them and to express their worries about the movement tendencies and the movement's policies towards opposition. Initially, like Chavez, he tried to proportionate blame, and he expressed as well, like to what extent, like the movement was responsible for this defeat, and tried to be critical of the policies towards like political opposition, and allowed some space for their media and for their civic associations, to articulate to vocalize their opposition and to articulate their political opinions and policy programs. But after that, he reversed, their this rhetorical speeches and tried to take some harsh measures in order to crack down on his opposition by closing, their media and like suppressing, journalists and political oppositions in order to prevent, any to prevent the creation of different political alternative or to articulate different policy program. And he actually moved towards re-centralization of political authority, and this led to more kind of authoritarian reversal after 2007. Supposedly you had like I usually have like simulation model regarding, the populist model of participatory democracy and the representative model of liberal democracy. But here, generally speaking, like the abundance or the availability of the oil rents enabled him or gave him leeway in decision-making process in order to fund or to provide these or to sustain these far-reaching community development programs, and to create, this, or to invest in his charismatic personality, and to create, this cult of personality around him. So he depended on some electoral. He actually counted on elections as well. He reached power and he got re-elected through the electoral machines or electoral procedures. So the model he established had some democratic elements based on these electoral machines, but it exhibited as well some authoritarian inclinations and radical and Bonapartist elements based on his personality and his hyper presidency feature of by basing the model on his charismatic leadership and depending heavily on his like personal judgment and giving himself like extensive constitutional prerogatives in order to make, whatever political and economic decisions. So again, like whether or not like populism offered an alternative path to representative liberal democracy, here, like you have like some facts with regard to like the programs or the public goods provisions, and who were included and who were excluded, and whether or not these associations worked freely or independently from the government. So first of all, like he improved, these social and economic indicators during the first 5 years of his rule, and he developed this. He played into people's emotions, and he developed some emotional bonds to electorates or to social constituents, and he developed these clientelistic links by establishing these extensive community development projects and community development programs. But again, he used these programs as it served as tools for co-optation and exclusion as well. So he co-opted people who benefited, or citizens who benefited from these programs. So they had to show loyalty and they had to vote for the movement in the elections in exchange for some material goods or some distributive benefits. And as well, he excluded those who didn't show faith in Bolivarian and his Bolivarian and revolutionary ideals. He alienated those who had like different discourse or different ideological predispositions and orientations. So people who don't believe in the movement or the Bolivarian ideas, they felt like totally disenchanted from the entire political process. And with these kind of ID cards, he increased the exit cost of the opposition. Like people who needed, or who thought about, thinking their political loyalty or allegiances, they felt it like they had to pay like incur like high cost by like excluding themselves, or by getting excluded actually from these misiones or from social benefits. So they actually preferred to abide by or to comply with the same revolutionary and Bolivarian ideals in order to sustain their benefits, or to guarantee their material benefits from these programs. So the boundaries about the main the people who benefited from these programs, or people who were excluded from these programs, to what extent these programs or these community-based development projects actually offered or adopted, embraced, these kind of inclusive approach towards um, all poor people, or all marginalized people in marginalized areas. He again, like as any populist leader, he relied on referenda in order to pass, their political decisions. So by amending the constitutions in order, as it happened with Korea, by amending the constitution in order to give the executive extraordinary authority or powers in order to make political and economic decisions, or in order to bypass, other political institutions, and this actually violated the checks and balances formula by offering, the presidency extraordinary or excessive authority when it comes to implementing or even making decisions and policies. So he actually depended heavily on referenda in order to implement or to push through his programs that actually faced fierce and social opposition. And one important one important feature, as well as it happened with Korea with the passing the new constitution, he subordinated, the state institutions to his personality and to the people who actually were loyal to him, or loyal to the Bolivarian revolutionary ideals. So by actually having the MVR depending heavily on his personality, by giving the executive or the presidency extraordinary or excessive authority in making decisions, or passing, the policy agenda, or placing or determining the political priorities. So this actually subordinated, all state institutions to his personality and to the people who were loyal to him, and this led to the erosion or slow erosion of the institutional setting of the state, that actually became much more salient after his death. So his personality played a pivotal role in arbitrating or solving the disputes inside the movement. And despite, the existence of some defection or some opposition from his allies that started to express their concerns and their worries about his authoritarian tendencies, or the movement tendencies and policies of stigmatizing and excluding opposition. So they started to express, their concerns about, the negative consequences, for these policies. But and he managed, to suppress in a way or another social oppositions or political opposition that they were totally or entirely on the other side, or on the other political camp. But the polarization was there, despite the fact that he managed, to quell or to suppress the social and political opposition by taking harsh measures against political opposition and social forces. But actually they started to surface again after his death, and this deep-seated polarization didn't fade away. And they, with the deterioration of the institutional setting and the institutional configuration on the one hand, and with the surfacing or bubbling up of these social forces again after his death, you can see total political crisis in Venezuela after the departure of the political and the populist political outsider that actually subordinated all the state institutions to his personality or to his power. And the movement continued to appeal to some supporters, but social polarization and social opposition, when these polarization and oppositions run so deep, it would become very difficult to stabilize or to reach a peaceful resolution for the process. We'll probably in the very last week we will have more open discussion about political outsider and populist model of democracy. So perhaps we can talk more about the ideational or philosophical underpinnings of this radical democratic model and this mass participation, mass-based participation model versus representative liberal democracy model. But here you have the main, we talked about the main features, the context within which political outsiders emerged, and then so the origins and the context, and then they shared more or less the same features, and then some sort of evaluation about the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and the plebiscitary character of this populist model of democratic practices or populist democracy, and the relationship between political outsiders or the populist leader with the state institution, and to what extent they, through some sort of legal engineering and constitutional amendments and manipulation of the legal framework and the political context, they subordinate, all the state institutions under or to the will of the executive or to the president, that may have long-term repercussions for social stability and for the functionality of the political institutions after their departure. The situation was less severe after Korea and Ecuador in comparison to Venezuela. So we'll get back again to this topic after in the very last week. So we'll continue next week with the issue of the quality of democracy and what happened in countries that witnessed prolonged civil wars, and they faced this dual track or dual transition from war to peace, and then from authoritarianism to democracy, and to what extent these peace settlements affected the quality of democracy. And we will focus more on the case of Colombia, because it had special context with the pivotal role of drug cartels. So it has political economy of civil war there. So you can speak of people who accumulated some sort of benefits or invested in the war in order to accumulate some economic benefits. In the very last week, so we have 2 weeks, 1 week for the quality of democracy and civil war cases, and then issues about capitalism and democracy, development, and democracy. So to what extent capitalism gave way to improvement in development indicators, and with this outside, we will talk more about these socioeconomic policies and left how, to what extent leftist governments actually managed to improve or to implement sound social and economic policies with long-term ramifications, and whether or not they delivered on their electoral promises, and the effect of rents in Venezuela on state institutions, and again before and after Chavez in the very last week. So that's all for today, and see you next week. Bye.